So much. And thank you for bearing with the fourth presentation before you get your coffee. My name is Emily Drummond. I'm a researcher who's employed at Haverford College, and I work with a grant program called Together with Humanities, which I will talk about a little bit more in a minute. And my collaborators, unfortunately, could not be here in person, but are actually the instructors of the courses that I'll be talking about today. So Brooke Lillehagen is a faculty member in linguistics at Haverford, and then Felipe Lopez is a professor at Seton Hall University and Haverford, and is from the Zapotec Pueblo of San Lucas Chiarini. So he is the Zapotec speaker who teaches that course. So to ground what I'll be discussing today, you may be familiar with the concept of content and language integrated learning, or CLIL, as I learned that it is abbreviated. Basically, the idea being that language learning is happening in tandem with content learning. And crucially here, this is not just teaching about a subject in a foreign language, but really teaching with and through a foreign language. And there are many case studies and a lot of literature showing that this allows students to access deeper criticality, transformative learning, better competence in the linguistic skills, as well as deeper authenticity and motivation, which are two of the themes we will also be talking about today. And CLIL is typically described for English or other commonly taught world languages. That is not the case for what I'm talking about today, but that's kind of the general background. Another framework that we paid a lot of attention to is CLAC, or Cultures and Languages Across the Curriculum. This is very similar in concept, so students applying their knowledge of language or languages in a variety of curricular contexts, not just within a traditional language classroom. And this has really taken hold in the United States context as a response to English monolingualism in the US. So this is a movement to facilitate intercultural competence and internationalization in a primarily monolingual environment. So today I'll be talking specifically about what role community engagement has in a CLIL context, and specifically when thinking about project-based learning or task-based learning, which is very common in these contexts. Why engage with the community? And in describing a particular course cluster that we've offered through our grant, we did observations and spoke with students and noted that students really responded to the authenticity that they felt in developing these relationships, as well as the connections that they made and the embodiment of the course material. We also observed that students experienced greater motivation, even beyond what we expect for CLIL environments, and really cultivated such a joyful communal environment. And crucially here, this is not community engagement that is passive on the part of the student or the community member. So it's not superficial engagement or witnessing community or community witnessing students. This is really collaboration and agented decision-making on the parts of both the community members and the students. And that's a really key part of that authenticity that we observed. And our specific case study that we'll talk about, as I mentioned, is a course cluster taught by my other two collaborators that focuses on a language called Zapotec. It's actually a family of languages indigenous to southern Mexico. And these courses look at historical texts written in Zapotec and combine that with modern Zapotec language learning. And students come together to collaborate to develop community resources. So if you're curious about this project, this is about 10 years or so in the making of collaboration with Zapotec community members, called the Teacher Project. You can read about it, the citation here. They also have a website, so feel free to check it out. And I want to just quickly pause here to address the fact that this is content and language learning for minoritized languages, specifically endangered languages. And this has been applied to indigenous languages, minoritized languages in other contexts, including South Africa, as well as Australian Aboriginal languages. And it can be a really important tool for language reclamation. And in our case, where students themselves are not heritage learners of Zapotec, they don't have Zapotec ancestry, language reclamation is still central to the learning process. They are aiding community members in the language reclamation process. So that's really central here. I also want to flag that there are some differences with, teaching a minoritized language versus teaching a global language, right? So using the language is often stigmatized in various ways or actively repressed. Teaching and learning resources might be scarce or under development. And in our case, like students might not have background knowledge of the language or culture. They don't have passive knowledge that they've seen on TV or movies about Zapotec language and culture. And what we hope to show is that the benefits of doing this kind of approach for minoritized languages does go beyond language learning, and it goes beyond language reclamation. So students are being exposed to indigenous epistemologies, expertise that is usually not prioritized or centered in higher education. And it allows them to participate in collaborative and community-oriented educational spaces that they may not otherwise have access to. So this is really opening a space to think about the world differently, see expertise and knowledge in a different way, and create meaning in different ways. So a little bit more about the grant. So this is a program called Together with Humanities, as I mentioned. This is a 3-year grant awarded to Haverford College, which is a college in the outskirts of Philadelphia in the US, from the Mellon Foundation. So I'm employed as a full-time researcher through this grant. And Haverford is relatively small in the US context. It serves about 1,400 students. And it's a liberal arts institution that only serves undergraduates. So we do not have graduate programs at Haverford. And the grant concept is to support courses that engage with themes of language, community, and power. So again, this highlights the CLAC idea of integrating language study across the liberal arts. We fund collaborative courses, so either co-taught by multiple instructors or 2 courses that are offered at the same time. So a course cluster. And all of our courses have community-centered course outcomes and projects associated with them. I've given some examples of some of our other courses in case you're interested. I won't talk about each of these individually, but just to give you a sense of the breadth of the program, we have ASL, Spanish, Indigenous language of Ghana. There's quite a wide range of courses that we offer. But today I'm going to be just focusing on one. So again, Zapotec is a family of languages spoken in southern Mexico. And this course cluster is pairing a linguistics course called Structure of Colonial Valley Zapotec, so Zapotec spoken in the colonial Mexican period, with a half-credit conversational course called Intro to Zapotec, where students learn a modern Zapotec variety spoken by Felipe, who is my co-author. And this has been offered twice, so last fall 2024, and currently, so it's ongoing, our project and our analysis. And each time there have been about 8 students in each course, with about 3 to 5 co-enrolled in both. So not every student has to be in both classes. And central to the course cluster is a shared project across both courses. So in the 2024 iteration, students collaborated to create a dictionary of the historical Zapotec language, where they included definitions in Spanish and English, and also included cognates in a variety of modern Zapotec languages. And then this time in 2025, students are translating a Zapotec will and testament written in 1786. So it's very small, but you can see a picture of the document there that they're translating. And then central to this is the community engaged portion. So not only are they engaging with Felipe, who's a native speaker of Zapotec, but they're also taking a 1-week trip to Tlapalula, a pueblo in southern Mexico, to learn from and share draft materials with Zapotec speakers there. So that is cluster. And before I get specifically into community engagement, I want to highlight that the CLIL thing is happening across these courses. So if you were curious, like, are they mutually reinforcing each other? Yes, they are. Students are really applying their knowledge across both of the courses in interesting ways. We have some quotes from students. Having a basic grasp of the modern Zapotec language illuminated the process of working with the linguistic text. Students saying, I wouldn't have gotten as much academic knowledge out of the course if we weren't also engaging with the conversational language. And then a quote from Felipe Lopez, the light goes on for them when they see similarities between something they've already seen in the historical text that is coming up in the conversational class. So that overlap is certainly happening. And now let's talk specifically about community engagement. So by far, the thing that we noticed the most from observation and from student reflections is that there was a real sense of authenticity, which is expected in a very project-based class. Students were describing real-world tasks rather than something that is simulated or idealized, like you might find in a kind of toy example in a different class. And we know that authenticity is great for supporting motivation and performance and contextualization of what students are learning. And the authenticity in our case comes from the fact that the tasks students were asked to complete, so the projects, were intentionally sized so that students could complete a final or near final draft and present it to the intended audience and receive feedback and get validation from that experience. So that's a key part of having an authentic task in this context, is being able to receive feedback from the audience. And third, interactions with both the community and the place, being in Oaxaca, embodied a lot of the concepts that were explored in class. So you see here, I have photos of a mojonera, or a border marker, and an altar in a church. These are two things that come up a lot in the texts, the historical texts, that students may not have any concept of what this thing is or what it's for. So by being there and seeing it, they're really getting that experience of having that concept embodied in front of them. So from some of our reflections, students constantly described what they learned as real, and specifically with real people. So highlighting this evidence that community engagement is really driving some of this authenticity. Working with speakers made language learning feel connected to real life. My learning was more real. There's a genuine application. And this third one, which is such a nice quote, it's a nice reminder that work in academic spaces isn't strictly theoretical and devoid of impact. Everything we've been doing is connected to real people and real challenges. So there's an extremely authentic reflection happening here from students. And this authenticity is really relational in nature and interdependent. So if you look at some of the words students use, they're using words like connected, rooted, things that are emphasizing relationality, contrasting that with things like abstract, self-contained, or theoretical. And again, I want to emphasize that there is authenticity in project-based learning in general. However, by moving beyond just being a class project, so this, you could have a project that was very authentic in nature that never went anywhere beyond the classroom. What's different in this case is that students then give it directly to, it will be used. It will be used by community members. They get feedback and insight. So they know that what they're doing has impact, and they know that it's being seen by another human, right? So just kind of enhancing that authenticity. Building on that, there was also quite a lot of motivation from students. So interacting with community members reinforced the idea that the work is interesting. the work is relevant and it's also important to someone. Not so beyond that intrinsic motivation of wanting to do a good job and being interested in it, they're also seeing the extrinsic motivation of seeing someone who also cares about the same thing. They are valued contributors, so they are creating something real. So they're empowered and motivated as contributors in that way. And specifically for Indigenous languages, it's really important to have this community engagement component because it reinforces the idea that this is not a language of the past. This is a language actively spoken, and it's a language that is useful. And that's an ideology that even Indigenous communities will replicate, that their language is out of date and useless. Some evidence for the motivation besides what students told us is that they pursued opportunities to continue the work outside of the context of the class. So 3 students actually approached Brooke, my collaborator, to create an independent study so that they could keep working on the materials after the course had ended. And we also had 3 students who applied for summer fellowships in summer 2025 to spend more time in Oaxaca and work more closely with collaborators there. So some of the photos from our summer interns are here, and you can see on the right that 3 of our students actually had the opportunity at that point to present their prototype dictionary to community members in Oaxaca. So that was a full circle moment for them through the summer internship. And the last theme I want to talk about is joy. It's very difficult to quantify joy or how joyful students feel, especially when you're asking them in a survey, did you feel joyful? Did you enjoy what you were doing? But we do have some evidence that this was a really joyful experience for instructors and for students and community members. So they describe the process as fun. I had fun in the process of language learning, yet in doing so was able to retain more than I expected. So there's an expected clash maybe between learning a lot and having fun, and they experienced both. And they also fed off the enthusiasm that the community members had for the work. So they saw the joy and enthusiasm that the community members had, which was then encouraging and heartwarming for them to take with them beyond the course. And as Felipe told me in one of our interviews, they're just having fun. They're so excited to be there. They're just having a lot of fun. And this is a small example. 2 students created Zapotec inspired dice to hang on his car mirror, right? So that's not something that was required of them. It's not something that he told them to do, right? This is just something that they thought would be fun and interesting. And to kind of contextualize the joy in the community piece, lots of the comments about having fun or feeling encouraged were really about feeling part of a team. So the language class made us feel like a team of language learners. It also, students commented on feeling accepted and feeling a sense of belonging, not necessarily with Zapotec, but with Spanish speakers and Hispanic people. And as Brooke put it, students also thought that they could be more themselves in their academic work, which is great to see as well. So to briefly conclude, our hope is that we've shown you that community engagement, when kind of scaffolded in appropriate ways, can build authentic relationships, can create space for motivated and joyful learning. And this also expands the literature on CLIL for Indigenous or minoritized languages. So in this case, we've shown not only is it possible, it's effective, but also importantly, it leverages the resources and structures of the University of Higher Ed for language justice. And I think I'm out of time imminently, so I'll just kind of leave this here for the question period, but I've talked a lot about the benefits of community engagement. There are also a lot of things that go into it. So lots of administrative labor, lots of time, lots of flexibility, and lots of ways to rethink traditional assessment and instruction as well. So I'll leave it there. Thank you so much. And I look forward to hearing your questions. Thank you guys.